All right, high rollers, very much looking forward to our chat tonight. Our last guest at Wikipedia, we called one of the smartest minds in darts. Well, ditto for this guy, an attorney at law, but as his Twitter bio suggests, he mostly tweets sports. And if you're a darts fan and you haven't followed him yet, do so now at BSD987. He is the co-host of the weekly Darts Cast and has interviewed some of the biggest names in the game. He's the guy who delves into darts and then breaks it all down for us. Burton DeWitt, our guest. Burton, welcome to the show, man. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Yes, thank you very much, Derek. Happy to be on.
I mentioned Wikipedia. He's American. You're in Houston, correct?
That is correct.
Now, I always find it interesting when I see the work that you guys do, and it really is prolific. Darts isn't as big on this side of the pond as, let's say, hockey or baseball, American football, and there you are, one of the main sources for darts info. How did this all start for you, man? How did it grow?
I guess it's the way that anyone else gets into darts. I used to be a horse racing journalist, and in 2012, all the British horse racing journalists started tweeting about the World Darts Championships. You know, the same way that I'm sure you got into it. And it just grew from there. I had to figure out what they were talking about, so I started watching and I got hooked. I guess it was December 2011. It was the 2012 World Championships, the year Adrian Lewis retained his title, beating Andy Hamilton in the final.
Wow. You know, when you say you got hooked, in poker, they say once you win your first pot, you're hooked. What hooked you about darts? I mean, for me, it's the fact that there's mind games, that there's heart, that there's skill, that anything can happen, and that if you really want it and put the work in, you can rise in this game.
I mean, it's a game that anyone can play. Not anyone can play at the level of Michael Van Guren or Michael Smith, but anyone can pick up a set of darts and throw three out the board, and with a little bit of practice, at least get it to hit the board. And to see people be able to do it at a level that I can't even imagine myself being able to do was just fascinating. And it's, generally speaking, quick-paced. Even slow players are, relatively speaking, playing at a quick pace compared to many other sports. And there's very little downtime. And it's a mental game. You mentioned it, not just in terms of the mind games that players play, but just in terms of having to figure out how to get from 501 to 0 as quickly as possible in a way that you're comfortable at without overthinking it. You have to think and not think at the same time. It's just a fascinating sport.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating too. You talk fine margins, so much money on the line these days, and you're going for a double, which isn't that big, and it's millimeters away. And how do they hold their nerve? That's what always gets me.
And I wish I had an answer to you. I don't know how they hold their nerve, because I know I can't. Well, at least I don't think I could. I've never had to play with 50,000 pounds on the line or anything like that. I think the most I've ever had on the line was $50. But I don't know how they hold their nerve, especially in a game of margins. But, we see it in other sports. That's why these are, even if you don't want to call them athletes, they're athletes, because they have to push everything aside and figure out how to keep their mind under control and beat their opponent, how to hit at the right time, hit and win with all the pressure on them. And I couldn't do it.
Well, I get a kick out of the whole question of, is it a sport or is it a game? I mean, if you know anything about darts, it's a sport. I mean, it's cutthroat. Look at these guys. I mean, it's incredible action. It's incredible entertainment, and they're very good. It's not like they just walk up there. They've put hours in before they really showcase their talents on that TV, on that stage.
Yeah, and if you ever go to any of those floor events, the doors open. Well, I'm not sure what time the doors open, but I know what time I've got in there, and Mervyn King's already probably 2 hours into his practice. But, they're there hours beforehand practicing. Not everyone, but most of them are, or at least putting a good amount of time in on the practice board, getting ready so that when their first game goes, whether it's at noon or 1 or whatever, they are ready to play at their best. And they have to, because I've seen what happens when a player is feeling lazy on a day and then goes out and loses 6-2. I'm not going to say who it was, but I've seen it. Just on that day, just wasn't feeling up to it and got absolutely thrown across the board by his opponent. You have to put in the time, not just during the week leading up to the event, but even on match day to get ready. It's just like before a football or soccer, as we would call it, match. You can't just go out and play. You have to stretch. You have to run. You got to get your feet loose, or else you're not going to perform.
Again, people, at BSD987, a darts goldmine, please follow this guy. He's really good. Okay, we start with the Grand Slam. I mean, it got wild in Wolverhampton. Before we talk about the final and that contact made between Gerwyn Price and Gary Anderson, I want to talk about Price himself. I feel this guy deserves a bunch of credit. I mean, in that match alone, the final, Ando's the heavy favorite. But what a job he's done. He just seems to have this competitive flame about him and absolute heart up there at the Aki.
Yeah, and you look, go back before the final to the quarterfinal where he was 10-5 down to Simon Whitlock. He was 10-5 down in the semifinal to Mensur Suljovic. And he got himself back into both those matches. Simon Whitlock was the 1-10 favorite when it was 10-5. And I believe Mensur Suljovic was the 1-8 favorite in the semifinal. And I talked about it on my podcast, which I think this will be out before the podcast is out. So everything I say on the podcast, you already heard by the time. But he was able to fight his way back into that match against Simon Whitlock. And okay, got lucky. Whitlock missed those 5 match starts. But Gerwyn Price took the chance that was given to him. And then against Mensur Suljovic, he created chances. The 170 out on the bull. And then bunch of other last start in hand finishes. And I think Mensur Suljovic got a little tired at the end, but Gerwyn Price just punished every mistake he made and forced Mensur Suljovic to make mistakes. And then we saw it again in the final. He wasn't as far down in the final as he was in the quarter or semis, but he was down 3 legs on multiple occasions and just stood in there, took out last start in hand 4 or 5 times to really just break Gary Anderson. At the end, we'll talk about that. But at the end, there was only going to be one winner on the day.
Yeah, it really was. And he got that last start double so many times, you just expected it. It was like clutch every single time. Even in the last 16 match with Josh Payne, that was tight, 5-5. And then he just dominated from there. I mean, the guy's got something special. Let's put it this way. I said this before. If he had the talent of, let's say, a Michael Van Gerwen or a Gary Anderson, with the way he's performed transitioning from rugby to now pro, that's not easy, right? I mean, if he had their levels of talent, that would be a beast.
But are we even sure that he doesn't? He's only been playing professional darts for 4 years now, and he didn't play much darts before he became a professional player. And the quality of his A game has gone up, especially in the last few months. And I said it back when he got relegated from the Premier League back in March. So I thought that would be good for him. I thought that was something he needed to learn from, and he has learned from it. And I don't think we have seen the best from him. I think he has a couple more gears that we haven't seen. Right now, yeah, we can say in terms of his A game, he might not be one of the 10 best players. He knows how to win, and he figures out how to win, which is why he's deservingly number 6 in the world. But I don't think we've seen the best from him. I think he has more talent up his sleeve than we've seen so far, and he's still learning how good he is.
That's a scary thought right there. Now, you did say on your podcast, and you mentioned it there, that losing all those games in the Premier League was a good thing for him. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, it's just learning his profession, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And people took his tweet, I think, the wrong way when he tweeted afterwards that he hated being in the Premier League. He definitely didn't word it the best way that he could have or should have. But he didn't mean that he wasn't grateful that he was in the Premier League. He was grateful for the opportunity. He didn't like losing. That's what he meant. And I think he felt like he wasn't ready for it yet. But he learned from it. And that's what you have to do. You have to learn how to take losing. You have to learn what it takes to be able to compete at that level every Thursday night against the other 9 best players in the world. And he wasn't ready for it at the time. But he's learned from it. And it made him hungry to prove that he can get back there, to prove that he deserved it this year and that he will be able to get it again. And he will be in the Premier League next year. He absolutely will be in it after winning the Grand Slam because he learned from it and went out and earned it. Starting with his performances on the European Tour, getting to that final where he lost to Johnny Clayton, but then also winning a European Tour event in September, and his performances on TV the last couple months. He's a much better player now. He's a much mentally stronger player now than he was even 6-7 months ago.
Okay, the final, man. Let's talk about that. That was just some gripping drama. As you're watching the final, take us through what you're thinking, the ebbs and flows. You mentioned that Anderson got ahead 3 legs a couple of times, but there Gerwyn was just hanging around, plugging away, taking his chances, and tension started to boil over. So walk us through your viewpoint of that final right to the very end, if you can.
And I'll preface it by saying we don't know what, if anything, Gerwin Price did or said the time that Gary Anderson stopped after hitting the treble for a start to leave the double and turned to look at him. Or maybe it was even in the crowd. We don't know because the players aren't mic'd. The only mic on stage is the one on the referee. So we don't know what happened there. So I will put that to the side. Because if Gerwin Price did say something or do something to distract Gary Anderson, that's cheating and that needs to be dealt with. But we don't know. We just don't know.
Right.
Beyond that, Gary Anderson lost his head. That's really what it came down to. Gary Anderson couldn't handle Gerwin Price's antics. And whether you like Gerwin Price's antics or not, whether you think there should be a place for them in the sport or not, they're within the rules. There might be another story about whether the rules should change, but they're within the rules.
Well, absolutely. And I did a little piece on this, and you look at the players you mentioned that he played. I mean, Josh Payne celebrated. So did Simon. I mean, not to the levels of Gerwin Price, but Menser does the head, but they all celebrate. There's so much on the line nowadays. It's big business. It's a big sport, and, it's cutthroat. So I'm for the celebrations. I'm not for the cheating.
Yeah, and that's why I said we don't know what happened in that one instance. I would hope that Gerwin Price didn't do anything, but I also hope that Gary Anderson wouldn't stop and stare at him if Gerwin Price really hadn't done anything. So we don't know what happened there. But I don't think the celebrations are cheating. And should he be celebrating in the middle of a leg? No. That's where I think the rules really do need to be changed. I don't think that a player should be able to go and run to the crowd after hitting a 1-7-4, which led to the, as Dan Dawson called it, the argy-bargy. But the rules do allow that. As far as the contact, until Gerwin Price retrieves his darts, the exclusion zone belongs to him. He hadn't retrieved his darts yet. Gary Anderson entered the exclusion zone and pushed Gerwin Price. And there's just no place for that. And it doesn't matter if you think your opponent is a child or acting like a child. Now, what Gary Anderson did in response was the act of a child as well.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, Gary Anderson's elite level, he's one of the best ever, right? But I've seen him before where he seems to make up reasons to get mad, like someone's not doing anything and he's just trying to motivate himself on, and he really couldn't handle it. I saw a tweet where it said that Gerwin just out-psyched him, and I believe that's exactly what happened. Now, you tweeted a couple of things real quick. Everything Gerwin Price has done aside, Gary Anderson entered the encroachment zone and pushed Gerwin Price. Unacceptable that nothing was done there. Then you also tweeted this. Whoever was the second referee in that match did a very, very, very poor job, and it needs to be said there was no adjudication of the exclusion zone in either direction.
Exactly. And I'm not sure who was the second referee. For TV events, there's obviously the referee you see on stage, but there's another person who's in charge of, in essence, looking over what's going on stage, because the referee can't see.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is that right? There's two of them. There's
two for television events.
Okay.
One of whom you won't see because he's, in essence, watching it off stage. And he has, according to the rules, he has the same powers as the first referee, with the exception that he can't adjudicate scoring. That is for the first referee. So Paul Hinks had exclusive control over whatever someone scored and, calling game shot and things like that. Paul Hinks also has some responsibilities to check out on the exclusion zone, but he can't see everything because he's having to, first and foremost, check the score out. And if Gary Anderson is quick into the exclusion zone while Paul Hinks is still checking the score, how's Paul Hinks going to see that? That's where the second referee is supposed to step in. And maybe something was said off stage that we don't know about. But there was things going on stage in the middle of the match that didn't get stopped, and something should have happened. Someone should have stepped in and calmed them down at the very least, if not something more drastic. Because you shouldn't be making physical contact with your opponent intentionally during the match, and Gary Anderson intentionally made physical contact with his opponent. Yeah, he pushed him toward the dartboard. Get your darts, buddy.
What do you think's going to happen at the Darts Regulation Authority with all of this? Because it's been referred to them.
I think it's probably going to be what it normally is, which is at maximum probably a 3,000-pound fine. Maybe if they find something really significant, there could be a suspended sentence like we saw with Adrian Lewis earlier in the year when he basically choked Jose Justicia. I don't think it's going to come to that, but I think they'll probably both be fined for whatever they want to say, bringing the game into disrepute is one of their favorite things that the DRA does. But I don't think it'll be anything more than that. Gary Anderson might receive another fine for his comments to Dutch media about Fartgate, where he said he said the S word, which will be considered cursing in media. So he'll probably get a 500 or 1,000-pound fine for that as well. But I don't think it'll be anything more than that. I think we'll see a couple 1,000-pound fines both ways, probably assuming Gerwin Price did do something that one time that Gary stopped and looked at him. But I don't think it'll be anything more than that.
I know you're doing the weekly Darts Cast tonight, so we're gonna wrap up here quickly. But I want to talk about the Darts Cast first. You've been doing this a while. I was on the website today. So much great content on there. Big names. You had Barry Hearn, Matt Porter, some of the biggest pros in the world. Tell us about that, man. weeklydartscast.wordpress.com. weeklydartscast.wordpress.com. You got to check it out.
I'll be honest, I actually didn't know what our website was until now. I leave that in the hands of my co-host, Alex Moss. It's just something we started a couple years ago. Alex Moss was the editor-in-chief of Darts Weekly and later Love the Darts magazine before time constraints had him stop doing that, but we've continued the podcast. That's why it's Weekly Darts Cast. The original name of the magazine was Darts Weekly, so we just did a play on that. But it's something we started almost 2 years ago now, and I'd like to say it's evolved a bit, but it's at the very least it's been a lot of fun doing it. And we try to get people on, not just, we've had most of the top players. We had Rob Cross on just a couple weeks ago. I think it's the first time we've had the reigning world champion on, reigning PDC world champion on. We've had Glenn Durrant on both times as reigning BDO world champion. But we also try to get players from all over. We've had some ladies darts players. We had someone who wrote a screenplay about Jockey Wilson we've had on as well.
Jockey Wilson, one of my favorites, is an absolute legend.
Yep, and they had a play at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, not this most recent summer, the previous. We had the guy who wrote that. Didn't actually know much about darts before he decided to write the play, but we had him on. We've also had some people from the disability darts on as well, and we try to get from pretty much all walks of darts on. We've had, of course, from the U.S., Larry Butler, from Canada, both John Part, three-time world champion, and the young Dawson Marshall on.
Well, that's amazing, man. Keep up the good work. Again, the website is weeklydartscast.wordpress.com. You can find them on Twitter at weeklydartscast. Now, I want to run through rapid fire real quick here because I've got so much to talk about, but maybe a sentence on each of these things real quick and then we'll wrap it up. MVG at the Grand Slam. He's playing brilliant, but still lost.
And I really thought he was going to win it. Gary Anderson just looked the better player in that match. And maybe it's motivation. That's something a lot of people have said. Maybe Michael, and it might just be what it is. Michael Van Gerwen really only cares about winning the world title at this time, and I don't know what else to say. I really don't know. It's been an odd year for Michael Van Gerwen.
The Germans are coming. Max Hopp, Martin Schindler, and now Mikhail Unterbuchner.
I'm going to say I disagree. I don't think the Germans are coming. I think the Germans are here, and the Germans are here to stay.
Raymond van Barneveld is going to call it quits after the 2019 season.
He's just not the player he was even 12 months ago. And like with Michael Van Gerwen, there seemed to be some sort of motivation issue. But in his case, I just don't think he has the stamina to compete over the course of a full day at a pro tour and these longer matches to be able to go the distance.
Robert Marjanovic is going back to the Ali Pali. Why are you taking his credit?
He gave me a set of his darts at the end of June and has just played phenomenally since then. So I'm going to take the credit that him giving me the darts and me starting to use them is what kickstarted his season because I need to take credit somewhere. Two
more quickly. Stand-up comedians at the German Super League.
Yeah, that was a bit odd doing that. I don't know what else to say.
I've got the tweet, so I'll put it up there. The word shambolic.
Yeah, I really did not know that was a British word because pretty sure I've heard it in darts commentary many times as well as other British sports commentaries. And I was actually playing darts on Sunday and I said shambolic and the 8 people with me had no idea what the word meant. And that's when I learned it's a British word.
Now, I mentioned off the top, and this will be the last question, that you mostly tweet sports. I know you're a big sports fan. You like the Rangers. I'm a Leafs fan. We got a good team this year. Your team's in second. I know you like some other sports as well. Oh, is there any correlation between some of the sports here in North America and darts? I mean, in terms of the stats and the things you look for when you delve into it?
I guess, I mean, as I said, I used to be a horse racing journalist, and horse racing is entirely statistics, no matter which point of view you look at it from. As a gambler, obviously you're going through those past performances to try to find value, but as a breeder, trying to figure out which bloodlines will produce the best horse. As an owner, trying to figure out where to get the value at auction. It's entirely a statistics-based sport, and even though I studied history and I'm a lawyer, numbers have always been my thing.
Well, I mean, numbers are a good thing to you because some of the stuff you put out there is excellent. I don't know how you do it, how you break everything down like that. The order of merit's confusing, but you're right on top of it. Burton DeWitt at BSD987 on Twitter. The weeklydartscast.wordpress.com at weeklydartscast. Please check them out. A wealth of information right there. Thank you so much for your time, Burton. Appreciate it.
Of course, Derek. Anytime.